Welcome to a celebration of the best moments in the mountain biking season. Over the next 70 minutes, we'll delight in the colour and spectacle of the sport and pay tribute to the best riders in the world. First, we concentrate on domestic race action, with the country's top riders in full-blooded combat. We focus on the year's buzzwords, body armour and suspension. The fastest thing on two wheels next. We have all the downhill highlights from home and abroad. And even look at those, well, unplanned moments. From Inverness to California and scheduled stops between, the very best of the GRUNDIG World Cup. Back on home soil and into South Yorkshire for tea and biscuits with Rally's David Baker. And then he packs us in his suitcase as we follow him to Canada for the climax of the season, the World Championships. First though, cross-country action from our own shores in Porthcawl in Wales, the opening venue for the 7-Up BMBF National Point Series. Situated nearby, the ruins of Markham Abbey. They provided the historic backdrop to some very tough terrain. We'll concentrate our attention on the elite riders, but before that, a look at the juniors. It was a massed field in the opening round, 2 laps of a 6-mile course for these 16 to 18-year-old junior men. In a field of mixed abilities, it was specialised Alan Gunner who got away first, followed by Formula One's Damien White. 17-year-old Sam Humphrey was next, riding for GT. Sam, who'd recovered from a broken collarbone sustained last season. It was Alan Gunner, though, who continued to set the pace, and with a mile to go on the second and final lap, was still 30 seconds up through the water. Humphrey was on his wheel, though, and upped his work rate over the last half mile to take Gunner in the finishing straight. Humphrey then won the first race of the season. Gunner on this occasion had to settle for second place. But no hard feelings between the two. The men's elite race, meanwhile, would be contested over 5 laps of the same course, and the early season test had attracted a clutch of overseas riders, including Tom Rogers and Mike Closer, riding for Alpine Stars and Peugeot Look respectively. Following the first tricky descent, it was reigning champion Tim Gould who'd blasted into a 30-second lead, followed by the USA's Tom Rogers.
Tom Rogers, 0026.
Rally's Barry Clark was in 3rd position and Mike Closer 4th. With Rally's men having a 5-strong contingent in this race, David Baker was also up among the leaders. For the women, it was 24-year-old Caroline Alexander who made use of her well-renowned hill climbing ability to set the early pace. Back with the men, and someone was missing. Peugeot Look's Tim Gould, having built up a 40-second lead, had taken a wrong turn.
Down.
He'd have to work hard to get back on terms, but he was out of the reckoning. As was this man Tom Rogers, who decided to retire complaining of fatigue. So the door was open and Rally's David Baker calmly took his chance. Having taken the lead on lap 3, he was looking confident and strong and beginning to pull clear of Closer and Clark. Caroline Alexander, who'd led the women's race from the start, was happy to do the same.
Go, Caroline.
Only Team Merrin's Sian Roberts offered any real resistance.
Go on, Sean.
Baker, though, could smell victory. His first of the season, and was still in command at the front. The real battle was for second spot, with Barry Clark still close enough to Mike Closer to catch the mud from his back wheel. The women's finish brought Rally's Caroline Alexander home first. A great start for her for the season. She never looked in any trouble. Sian Roberts was second. David Baker too had posted a warning to his rivals with this performance and a first win in the opening race. The scrap between Closer and Clark went all the way to the line, with the veteran American just having the extra pedal power to take second place. So Team Rally were happy with their double in Wales, with the riders having blown away all the early season cobwebs. Race number 2 of the 5-race series moved to the Midlands, where in the shadow of Clipston Colliery and the edge of Sherwood Forest, the likes of David Baker and Tim Gould had upstaged King John and Robin Hood as a centre of attraction. Rain and mud had been replaced by sun and dust, and the 6-mile course was sure to produce some very fast times. Once again, the juniors were first away, ripping up the track, which was so much a part of this attractive course. Robert Thackeray was away well at the start, but after the race had settled down, it was Sam Humphrey and Alan Gunner who emerged at the front of the pack and steered their way through some very tricky sections of woodland and off-camber terrain. Sam Humphrey maintained his impetus to record his second win of the season. 2 out of 2 for him. Whilst Alan Gunner took another creditable second place for the Specialised team. In the elite class, Tim Gould found himself on the second row of the starting grid, an unusual position for him, but one determined by his unfortunate navigation in race 1. This inconvenience didn't seem to bother Gould though, and he was soon out in front, leading a very impressive pack of riders. Barry Clark was to take over at the front for a time, with his rally teammates Timmis and Baker prominently tucked in behind. The riders weaved their way in and out of bomb holes and other natural hazards. And as the race progressed, it was rally rider Adrian Timmis who fancied a stint at the front. Tim Gould, meanwhile, was working hard to split the rally trio. And the Welshman, Tim Davis, was still in contention, back in 5th spot. In the women's race, it was once again the prominent yellow and black of Rally which stood out, with Caroline Alexander spinning gears to stay ahead on a course which wasn't suited to her own specialist abilities. There were very few climbs and lots of fast track. Isla Roundtree and Deb Morell pushed her hard. Back with the men, and a pattern was beginning to emerge. The rally team was sensibly employing race tactics to draw the energy from Gould and Alpine Stars Tim Davis. Barry Clark and Adrian Timmis were happy to act as domestique for David Baker, who would sit in the pack and await his chance. His chance came on the last lap, and still flanked by rally teammates, he made his move, hoping that the spirit and strength of Gould and Davis had been sapped. Meanwhile, Alexander maintained a precarious 20-second lead as she started her own final lap, with Deb Morell and Isla Roundtree having exchanged positions just behind. For the men, though, David Baker and the rally team had got it absolutely right. Baker powered away to record his second straight win, using the energy he'd conserved earlier on. Barry Clark took second position with a very gutsy ride. He'd set the pace for much of the race. And Rally's Adrian Timmis claimed third spot, and an unprecedented 1-2-3 for Rally, having closed out Tim Gould. For the women, Caroline Alexander held on to complete a memorable day for the Rally team. Newnham Park near Plymouth provided the venue for race number 3 of the series, a popular destination for the riders because of its mixture of steep climbs, bomb holes and its infamous pipeline descent. It was Andrew Wright and Alan Gunner who made the most of their downhill bike handling skills to put an early distance between them and the rest of the field. But Sam Humphrey, Matthew Guy and Ian Cuthbertson worked hard to stay in touch. This is what the riders see on the way down. And what we saw by lap 3 was all too familiar. GT's Sam Humphrey out in front again across the top of the course, trailed by teammate Andrew Wright. By the finish, Humphrey had proved too strong once again and was very pleased with his win. The elite men didn't seem to want to wait for the hooter at the start of their race. Such was their determination to set off to a flyer in the opening 300 metres. It was Alpine Star's Tim Davis who led the riders round the first bend and into the water splash as they began their climb to the pipeline descent. On the way back down, the familiar figure of Rally's David Baker was first on the horizon, as he and Davis picked the route for the rest of the pack to follow. Diamondback's Rory Hitchens wasn't able to follow the trail quite so well. The women's elite class was led into the water by Caroline Alexander, who was looking for her third straight win. But the likes of Isla Roundtree, Jackie Fletcher and Deb Morell were hard on her heels. As the men's race progressed, it was Tim Davis who stole a march on the rest of the field, taking advantage of a Baker tumble. Davis had taken a break from international competition to return home to compete on this, his favourite course. Back with the women, and Caroline Alexander had made the most of these stiff climbs to put some air between herself and the chasing pair of Roundtree and Morell. Roundtree was riding with a broken left thumb, but that didn't seem to hamper her. On to lap 3, and over Dartmoor, David Baker had reeled in Tim Davis and had taken some 30 seconds out of him. The women's race was ever-changing too. Deb Morell taking over in first position and showing her downhill skills, making the pipeline descent look easy. Caroline Alexander, meanwhile, had been a casualty of the tricky course and had been taken to hospital with a suspected broken collarbone. The desire to record that third win had got the better of her. David Baker, meanwhile, was maintaining the team's consistency and wouldn't let go of the lead he held over Tim Davis. Davis, though, was riding well, proving without doubt that he's one of the country's very best. Adrian Timmis was also going well, the rally team once again dominating the top placings. At the finish, it was a bit like déjà vu, with Baker recording his third win of the season despite his fall on lap 2. There was also a concerted effort by this man, Tim Davis. A good result for him. Adrian Timmis was third, a very deserved round of applause for that rider. Back with the women now, and Deb Morel had taken advantage of Alexander's misfortune, and the reigning national champion would use this race as a springboard for her to top the overall standings. And wasn't she happy with that success? A check on the positions then after round 3. First David Baker, second Adrian Timmis, third Tim Davis, Raleigh 1-2 at the top of the standings. So Deb Morel took advantage of Alexander's misfortune to record her first win of the season. Thankfully, Caroline Alexander's shoulder injury proved to be minor. Jackie Fletcher back in third place. Race number 4 would be the toughest of the season for the riders as they made the 76-mile ferry trip to the Isle of Man. 10 miles from Douglas and lying in the shadow of Snae Fell, the 11-mile loop was not for the faint-hearted. The juniors were set 2 laps, and once again the battle for honours was between specialised rider Alan Gunner and the GT combination of Andrew Wright and Sam Humphrey. Humphrey needed to win this race to claim the series. Humphrey, having trailed for much of lap 1, caught the early leaders by lap 2 and looked well placed to record his 4th consecutive win. And victory meant he took the title of Junior National Champion. So, how did it all feel?
Arms aloft, well done, Sam. Great ride.
Bit of relief, pleased and tired. But it's quite a nice feeling to know that I've won a year-long struggle. Look forward to the one day in the Worlds now.
Only the professional elite riders made the trip across the water. The question was whether David Baker would tie up the championship in the senior event, as Sam Humphrey had done in the juniors. The competition was fierce though, and the course very hazardous. It'd have to be at his very best. In the women's race, Caroline Alexander fought back a heavy cold to work an early lead on the first climb. With Deb Morel leading the series, she was keen to regain the advantage. This will give you an idea of what the descent is like. It's very fast and very, very bumpy. This is the bottom of the descent, and David Baker's in the lead, followed by Gary Coltman. Gary, who perhaps didn't make the wisest gear selection, and then Peugeot's Nick Craig in third place. Back with the women, and it was Deb Morel's downhill skills which began to pay dividends. She overtook Alexander to go into first position. Unfortunately, a puncture prematurely ended her race just as she was beginning to look strong. Valuable points lost in the race for the title. Alexander, meanwhile, was making the most of things and was doing her best to pull away from her nearest rivals, Shan Roberts and the Isle of Man's own Jackie Fletcher. In the last lap of the men's race, Raleigh's Adrian Timmis was comfortably ahead, with David Baker losing the lead and the air out of his back tyre with a puncture. Former cross-country runner Richard Cross was up to second in the race of his life, but Baker wasn't finished yet and was flying down this final 2-mile descent to recover lost time. The end of the women's race saw Shan Roberts record her first win of the season. She'd managed to overhaul Caroline Alexander in the run-in. A popular win for Shan, whilst Caroline, on this occasion, not on her best form. She'd have to settle for second. The men's race was far from over though. In fact, in some ways, it was just beginning. Timmis was still leading, with Cross having punctured. Baker was on the wheel of his rally teammate, and both were going all out to win. On the very final corner, the fastest descent on the course, Baker took the inside line to force Timmis into second place and allow himself to be acclaimed series champion.
Yeah, I've had 4 wins in the series and it's the best 4 rides, so in theory I don't have to ride the final event, but I'll be there.
And he was there, as were the rest of the travelling caravan of riders, this time to the rolling Sheffield Hills in Northumberland, and a course comprising of 5 miles of tough border countryside. The men's elite race buoyed by the return of Tim Davis and Tim Gould. Davis and Baker sprung an early lead, with Gould, complaining of a virus, struggling for once to match the pace. The women's race started with a very steep, difficult climb, many riders opting to dismount and carry their bikes over the rocks. Inevitably, it was Caroline Alexander who got away first, perhaps with a point to prove after 2 disappointing results. The women's title rested on this race, but as Alexander got away, Deb Morell ran into mechanical problems and back into 5th place. She was looking tired. With the men's title already decided, the top riders were interested in impressing the selectors and booking a place in the World Championship team. Nick Craig and Tim Davis were leading David Baker here on lap 3. The women's race was once again dominated by Caroline Alexander. She'd hit her best form at the right time and, after 2 laps of the race, was already a minute ahead of the field. Lap 5 for the men, and with 1 lap left, David Baker made a decisive break. Having sat on Tim Davis' wheel for 4 laps, he decided that the time to attack had come, leaving Davis to look on. Meanwhile, Alexander was consolidating her lead and finished first quite comfortably. And so she became the 7-up BMBF National Series champion. Shan Roberts rode well to take 2nd place, but all eyes were on Caroline Alexander.
Yeah, National Series is mine. I want the National Championship though.
David Baker made it another rally double act with a ride of superb confidence to give him a clean sweep of victories in the series. So a 1-2-3 for Rally, confirmation of their dominance in the National Series. Baker first, Tim is 2nd, Clark 3rd. In the Women's Championships, Caroline Alexander takes 1st place, Shan Roberts in 2nd place, Deb Morell 3rd. The National Points Series was certainly an endurance test, and it had taken its toll on many riders, but they'd have to pick themselves up for the final date on the domestic calendar, the 7-up National Championships. Broxer Forest in Scarborough would provide the competition venue for the country's finest mountain bike riders. Before we look at the cross-country action though, let's drop in on the toughest discipline of all, the hill climb. A 2-mile-long climb rising 600 feet along wet forest trails, and it was this man here, Alan Gunner, who dominated the junior event. Alan made the most of an early start to set the fastest time and retain his title. In the senior event, it was Adrian Timmis who set the early pace, but teammate Barry Clark finished 13 seconds quicker to take the gold medal. In the women's race, who else? Caroline Alexander. Her time of 13 minutes, 19 seconds was nearly a minute quicker than her nearest rival. And so to the cross-country and the junior event. Conditions made very difficult for everyone, with a constant heavy rain turning earth into mud. National Series champion Sam Humphrey was missing, leaving the door open for teammate Andrew Wright. Andrew made the most of the opportunity and set the early pace, occasionally swapping the lead with Formula One's John Samways. At the end, though, it was Wright who deservedly held on to complete a fantastic season for the Karate GT Juniors.
You know, I had to do something for the team because, you know, Sam wasn't here and he's been doing so well throughout the year. So, you know, it was up to me this time.
The elite race had attracted all the big names, and they were ready for the challenge ahead.
I'm feeling okay. I'm not feeling the top of my form. I'm just hoping it's all going to come together for this race and I'll surprise everybody.
Felt good all week, so hopefully it's come right on the day.
I'm going quite well, I'm quite confident. It's the same for everybody out there in this dirt, so we'll just see how it goes.
anything can happen. So everyone who finishes deserves a medal, I think, today.
Early on, David Baker was certainly staking his claim for a medal, and by the first crossing of the Derwent was clear of the field. Back at the start of the women's race, and it's essential to start well over the early section of the course, which is very rutted and difficult to ride on. This will give you some idea of the conditions, which were extremely wet and treacherous. It's important to stay out of trouble as much as possible and on the verge of the hazard. Despite these slippery slopes, David Baker managed to do just that, and halfway around lap 1 had a clear lead over his old friend and rival Tim Gould, who didn't fare quite so well in some of the conditions. And if someone as experienced as Tim can run into problems, you have some idea of what the riders are up against. Tim, though, recovered well to catch up with Baker. Gould's Peugeot-look teammate Fred Salmon was through in 3rd position. He's a very popular rider. The climb up through Broxer Woods saw Baker still leading, but Tim Gould, former world hill climb champion, was beginning to reel him in. Tim Davis was now up to 3rd. Tim's had a very consistent season, both at home and abroad, and without the domestic backup of a major team. In the women's race, Caroline Alexander was at it again. She'd said she wanted the title of national champion to go with her point series triumph, and judging by this performance, we could take her at her word. Deb Morel in 2nd position, starting lap 2, was already a minute and a half down.
About a minute and a half down on Caroline, Deb.
Sian Roberts 3rd, keeping Deb Morel in her sights. By lap 3, David Baker got away from Gould and Davis, powering his way forward towards the title of national champion. During the season, he was content to let others lead the race, then make his move. But here, he'd led from start to finish. Finishing first was becoming something of a speciality for Caroline Alexander, undoubtedly the best female mountain biker in the UK. Second, a gutsy performance here from Deb Morel, with the spoils once again to Alexander.
National Point Series winner, now national champion. How does it feel?
I don't know really. I don't know.
This is the one you wanted?
Yeah, more than anything I wanted to win this, yeah. And I did it.
And the familiar story continues. A rally 1-2 as an exhausted David Baker crosses the line for 1st place. Great credit too to Tim Gould, who'd pushed Baker all the way. And a Welsh double to round off the medal, Sian Roberts for the women and Tim Davis, who finished with a wheelie and a bronze medal.
Yeah, I said it was going to be like a 3-hour cyclocross, and it was exactly that. Usually we're only racing on cyclocross for an hour, so it's like 3 times as hard as what we usually have it. But even like the downhill, you had to like try really hard. It weren't like any other mountain bike race where you could like ease up a bit downhill. You just had to like go flat out wherever you could.
With riders recording speeds in excess of 50 miles an hour on downhill sections of courses, survival and protection are paramount. The rider's answer is body armour. Coming downhill at speed can be very hazardous, and with courses becoming faster and more difficult, riders are wearing an extra protective layer to combat the elements.
It just gives you the confidence, gives you the edge. Just when you think you're on the edge, if you're going to fall off, you just know you're protected. So you just feel you can go faster with the protection.
Body armour comes in different shapes and sizes and is proving ever more popular. The suits seen here are modelled on motocross designs manufactured by Dionyse and Sinsala respectively. They're some of the most impact resistant and are guaranteed to protect the body should you decide to go walkabout from the bike. In recent years, one of the most dramatic innovations in mountain biking has been the development of suspension on bikes. The competition between manufacturers to combat the constant stress created by the sport has been fierce, and there are a variety of suspension systems available. Some are fully integrated, allowing an easily adjustable amount of travel or stiffness. Designs like the Allsop soft ride system, for example, aim to suspend the rider rather than the bike by using a virtually freestanding carbon fibre beam. But for all the technological advances made in full suspension bikes, the design which finds most favour amongst riders is the suspension fork. Here the front forks of the bike work like a piston to cushion any impact before it reaches the handlebars. Currently, some riders favour suspension forks, while others prefer to ride with no impact-absorbing system. At every venue, each bike is particularly modified to adapt to the terrain ahead. And team mechanics provide the backup, which has been so much a part of many recent race successes. The sleepy town of Hamsterley in County Durham played host to the opening 7-Up BMBF downhill event of the season. This year at last, the key discipline of downhilling had gained independent recognition. But what's the excitement of it?
Well, it's a sport where you just flat out for about 3 minutes. It's quite technical. It's a mixture of speed and strength and technical ability. So it's all about getting around the corners on the limit and staying on your bike.
So 1992 had brought nationally recognised events. Unfortunately, the weather had conspired against the riders in this first race, run over fast fire tracks and a very steep and rocky final section. In the junior race, the Scott Diamondback rider Simon Kipling was the fastest. In the last year's World Championships, Simon recorded one of the top 5 qualifying times in the junior event, but suffered the misfortune of a puncture in the final. Here in Durham, his time, 4:20, was 3 seconds quicker than his nearest rival, Daniel Guy. The women's event was dominated by the downhill expert, Deb Morell. Despite an uncertain start due to the riders having to start with a foot down, Deb showed all the skills she's known for as she piloted her full suspension bike to victory. In the senior men's event, Jason McCroy of Salsa MB UK set the time that for most of the afternoon looked like being the winning one. He still held the leading time when the seeded group of riders had completed their runs. But Scott Diamondback rider Jason Shackleton had mistakenly been left out of the leading group. He was able to take advantage of the fact that earlier riders had cleared the course of larger rocks and scorched down to take victory in a time of 4 minutes 9 seconds. The picturesque setting of Lyme Park in Cheshire provided the venue for the next downhill fixture of the season. Once again, the course suffered at the hands of the weather. It had been hard-packed for the previous 2 days, but had now turned into a precarious and slippery track. Some riders found the conditions just a little too difficult to cope with. In the junior event, it was Simon Kipling who again clocked the fastest time of 3 minutes 37. This time was 15 seconds faster than his nearest rival. The women's race was again taken by Deb Morell. Despite her feelings that she hadn't had a good run, her time of 4 minutes 15 was nearly 8 seconds quicker than the second place Karen van Meerbeek. Pre-race favourite in the men's race, Jason Shackleton, made it another 1-2 for his team with his second win of the season, shaving 1/10 of a second off the fancied Nick Craig's time. He'd done just enough. At the National Championships in Scarborough, the Scott Diamondback boys were at it again. Simon Kipling was making this very difficult course look easy, taking the National Junior Downhill title. It seemed to be a case of anything you can do, I can do too, as a familiar purple and black strip of Jason Shackleton tore through the course to record the fastest time in the senior men's race to claim the gold medal. The only real surprise saw Sian Roberts upset the odds to take the women's downhill title in only her first downhill race of the season. Deb Morell was 8 seconds slower in second place. The first race of the Grundig Downhill Super Cup was in the Norwegian ski resort of Lillehammer, venue for the next Winter Olympics. With fine weather and a dry course in front of her in the women's event, it was Austrian Sibylle Schrockenfuchs who began her descent through the forest tracks. With 2 runs to count, the Austrians set a total time of 22 minutes and 30 seconds. Her closest rival was the experienced German competitor, Regina Stiefel, who looked comfortable throughout her descent. She crossed the line, giving her an aggregate time of 20 minutes 46 seconds. Stiefel's win was duly acknowledged by the well-dressed locals. In the men's races, it was Swedish downhill star Tommy Johansson who went off to a flying start. He surpassed his determined first ride of 9:33 with a ride of under 9 minutes in his second run, and he was delighted. Who could beat him? Unfortunately, not this competitor, Britain's Jason McCroy. On the start grid, it was reigning Grundig downhill champion, Swiss downhill expert Albert Eaton, who's showing devastating handling skills in his second ride. Crossing the line, he took the Lillehammer race, an indication of his early dominance in the Super Cup. Arriving back from 2 races in North America and 1 in Austria, round 5 of the Grundig Downhill Super Cup was in the established venue of Il Cioccio in Italy, a previous venue for the World Championships, and a favourite, well, certainly with the wine lovers. In the women's event, first round winner, Regina Stiefel, had also taken round 4, beating her rival Susie Buchweiser into second place. With Stiefel not appearing in round 5, Buchweiser took her chance. She tackled the tricky and demanding course with style and panache. She raced down to set a time of exactly 8 minutes in her second run.
Number 404, Susie Buchweiser, 8 minutes exactly. That is her first time consecutively.
On home soil, it was Italian Giovanni She was tipped as a possible favourite for the series. Head down, she crossed the line in 8:38, not fast enough to prevent Buchweiser taking victory.
Number 402 from Nancy Joanna, time 8 minutes 38.
Up in the Italian hilltops, the men were ready. German downhiller Jürgen Sprich looked strong. He handled the course superbly, flying down the sharp descents and corners.
Jürgen Sprich. Auf Jürgen!
Coming to the finish line, he posted a time of 7 minutes 15 seconds in his second run. Swiss downhiller Albert Eaton had looked comfortable all through the Super Cup, but here he had to match a very fast time.
Uno!
È lui.
Vai!
Vai Albert, vai!
Via! Campione del mondo, eh?
Non è campione del mondo. Lui è Iten.
Vai!
Vai!
Norwegian Rune Høyerdal looked on as Eaton crossed the line in 7:14, which, though faster than Sprich's second run, was still not enough to beat Sprich's first time of 7:12. Next stop, France. And a very wet and muddy La Bourboule for the sixth and final race of the Super Cup. In the women's event, it was the Italian Giovanni Benazzi who, in quite terrible conditions, rode superbly, forcing her way through the mud like a snowplow. In her first run, coming over the final ramp jump, she clocked a time of 11:37, 22 seconds ahead of Stiefel. In the men's competition, the man who caught the eye was local rider Fabrice Taillefer. He was competing in his only downhill Super Cup. He tackled the extremely hazardous conditions, treacherous rocky sections and the slippery steps. He did this anybody else to take the race. An amazing sticky end to the series. Confirmation of the result of the downhill Super Cup, it was Italian Giovanni Bonazzi who took the women's crown. Albert Eaton, who rode in every event, retained his men's title. In mountaineering terms, Chris Bonington has reached near legendary status. But in mountain biking, he admits to a quickening of the pulse.
I was amazed at how it's hooked me. And I think it's a sense of there is a real sense of challenge and adventure in it. For a start, it's not an easy option. I mean, the amazing thing is pedaling up these tracks and paths that I've been running up for years. It is actually harder work pedaling up on a mountain bike than it is running, and you go a little bit faster, which is satisfying. Coming downhill, of course, it's immensely exciting, and I'm real chicken. I mean, I don't go that fast, but it still is very, very exciting.
As president of a number of environmental concerns, he stresses the importance of conserving and respecting our surroundings.
I think it's very important to observe the custom of the area that you happen to be in. And for instance, here in the Lake District National Park, and of course some of the best mountain biking is in the various national parks around the country, I think have a very sensible set of guidelines or rules, if you like, which is basically stick to bridle ways or byways, and then use common sense. And you can go into some wonderful, exciting kind of terrain and yet still be within the guidelines that the national park has put out, and which the mountain biking fraternity, I think, has adopted and agreed to.
Having led assaults on Everest and other historic climbs, Chris is well aware of our fragile relationship with the environment.
Whatever field we happen to be in as a mountaineer, which I'm primarily, we're beginning to realise, that we have got to start being aware of our environment, whether it's climbing in the Himalayas or whether it's climbing here in this country. And it's the same with mountain bikers, and I think all the users of the national park.
Chris's Rally Ogre bike is his pride and joy, and is named after the Himalayan climb that nearly cost him and his climbing companion their lives. Round one of the Grundig World Cup took us to Houffalize in Belgium. World champion John Tomac, the #1 in mountain biking, took the first race by storm. A 7-minute margin is winning time. He never looked like being caught. In the women's race, Alison Sider, a former road rider from Canada, led from the start. Although coming up to the finish line, she had a close call with Germany's Susie Buchweiser, one of the closest ever finishes in a World Cup race. Round 2 of the World Cup to Landgraaf in Holland. John Tomac fast off the blocks. This time though, Swiss rider Thomas Frischknecht was equal to him and beat him on the line. In the women's race, Alison Sider led from the start, but just as she'd won by a short distance in Belgium, she missed out narrowly to Ruthie Mathis of the USA. Round 3 and a Le Mans-style start in Strathpeffer in Inverness in Scotland, and Tomac once again the man to catch. He pulled away on lap 1. As the race progressed, he sensed a familiar threat just behind, and Thomas Frischknecht was once again on his wheel. Our own David Baker was having a strong race back in 3rd spot, competing in his only World Cup race of the season. As the race wore on, Frischknecht made use of his cyclocross experience to get the better of Tomac and some treacherous conditions. At the line, a mini protest from the Swiss rider as he carried his bike over the line, complaining of the heavy going. In the women's race, it was Alison Sider who made off with the leader's jersey, but with a very strong field, the lead was always likely to change hands. For much of lap 1, Germany's Susie Buchweiser was the one to catch. Czech rider Eva Orvasova did just that and looked strong, as did Ruthie Mathis, wearing the world champion's rainbow jersey. Buchweiser then fought back after Orvasova had fallen to overhaul them both, claim the victory in the first shower. Back to the continent for round 4 of the Grundig and to Klosters in Switzerland. The race was fought out between Britain's Tim Gould and Syria's leader John Tomac. The rally's Barry Clark rode an impressive race to take 3rd place. But at the line it was John Tomac who got ahead of Tim Gould to take victory. In the women's race, Canada's Alison Sider made the early running, and at the line she duly won her 2nd race of the season, putting her in 2nd place in the overall standings. For round 5, the riders crossed the Atlantic to Hunter Mountain in New York State. In wet and muddy conditions, it was Swiss rider Thomas Frischknecht who once again showed his cyclocross skills. However, he had to be content with 2nd place behind former American cyclocross champion Don Meyer. In the women's race, another Swiss rider, Chantal Ducourt, took the early lead. She held off the attentions of a chasing pack which included the last 3 world champions, Sarah Ballantyne, Julie Furtado and Ruthie Mathis. At the finish, Ducourt came across the line to record her first win of the season. Round 6 of the Grundig saw the cavalcade move north to Canada. Once again, it promised to be another battle between Thomas Frischknecht and John Tomac. But Tomac was to suffer mechanical problems, and Frischknecht fought out the lead with American Darrell Price. By the finish, it was Frischknecht who got ahead for his 3rd win of the season to lead the World Cup Series. The women's race was dominated by former world champion Julie Furtado. After a disappointing start to the season, Julie once again found the form to take her opening win of the year and remind everyone of her pedigree. Round 7 took the riders back to the USA, and this time to Mount Snow in Vermont. Once again, it was world champion John Tomac who took the lead, but he was chased hard by a group which included Thomas Frischneck. And by the finish, it was a Swiss rider who got ahead to claim his 4th win of the season and reinforce his lead in the overall standings. The women's race also saw a Swiss winner as Chantal Ducour claimed her 2nd win of the year to complete a great weekend for the Europeans. Round 8 stayed in the USA, Mammoth Mountain in California to be exact, home of the famous Kamikaze downhill run. In the men's race, with one result not counting, Thomas Frischneck had decided not to race, leaving John Tomac to display his descending skills. Tomac led for most of lap 1, but a very strong field was on his tail. It included Tinker Juarez and the man they call the Lung, Ned Overend. As the race progressed, Overend, the old stager, overtook Tomac, who could only watch the dust fly from the wheel in front of him. The very popular Overend crossed the line first to fortify his 3rd position in the Grundig rankings, with Tomac's 2nd place allowing him to move within striking distance of Frischneck at the top of the leaderboard. In the women's race, it was Julie Furtado, wearing the series leader's jersey, who made the most of the dusty conditions to pull away. Susan D'Amati of the USA was riding well in 2nd place, but at the line, Julie Furtado took the win and the applause. She was now 9 points clear in the series. Round 9 saw the racing move back to Europe and into the Black Forest region of Germany. With so many American riders deciding not to travel, the opportunity for the Europeans to galvanise their efforts was great. Unfortunately, Frischneck suffered a puncture, leaving the door open for Gerhard Zadrobilek to force a pace on a very fast course. Britain's Tim Gould was going well early on, but the huge crowd were out to cheer only one man, Gerhard Zadrobilek, as he milked their applause to great effect, and with cowbells ringing in his ears, did well to maintain his lead over Danish rider Henrik Janice, who was also looking strong at the season's end. Janice also was driven on by one of the best crowds of the season. At the line though, Zadrobilek recorded his 1st win of the year. In the women's race, it was 2 Swiss women, Sylvia First and Chantal Ducour, who forced the pace. The Czech rider Eva Orvasova, so consistent through the season, was placed 3rd. At the finish though, it was First who held on to post her end-of-season intentions. And so to the final decisive round of the Grundig World Cup. In the men's race, only 6 points separated Tomac and Frischneck. Either could win the series. As for the race, it was the USA's Rishi Gruel who did the early pace setting, while Tomac and Frischneck were busy watching each other. In the 2nd lap, 37-year-old Ned Overend, never one to hang around, had decided enough was enough and made his decisive move. Meanwhile, Tomac and Frischneck were entertaining the crowds. Overend continued to pull away, his only real competition coming from teammate Darryl Price. At the line, Overend had won the race, with Tomac 5th and Frischneck just behind in 6th. That meant the Swiss rider had done enough to win mountain biking's World Cup crown. Could the climax of the Women's World Cup be as close? Well, it was even closer. Only 3 points separated Julie Furtado from Ruthie Mathis at the start of the race. Mathis had to finish in front of Furtado. On lap 1 though, Furtado had stolen a short lead on the world champion, but there was nothing in it. But by lap 2, it was all change. Mathis defending a 40-second lead until this happened. Did she lose time? Well, she would have done, except Furtado wanted to follow the same track. Ruthie Mathis then coming home in first place to claim the Grundig title. Julie Furtado having to settle for second place. Confirmation then of the final standings in the men's. First Thomas Frischknecht, second John Termack, third 37-year-old Ned Overend. Britain's Tim Gould finished a creditable fifth. In the women's standings, Ruthie Mathis took the championship by virtue of the fact that she won the final race. Julie Furtado second, Chantal Ducour third. National mountain bike champion David Baker is the jewel in rally's crown. He says mountain biking isn't as easy as it looks.
It's sort of so hard that you can't sort of like begin to describe how hard it is unless someone has actually competed in a race. People say other forms of cycling are hard, but this has got to be like the hardest of the lot, really. On the start line, it's a sort of sport where everyone is an individual, and you've got to race against 100 riders in the field. You're not racing against one rider or two riders, you're racing against the whole lot of them. Whereas in road racing, you've probably got 10 guys out of the field of 100 who you're actually racing against, and the other riders are working for that one rider. In mountain biking, it is literally every man for himself on the start line.
Being the number one in such a tough sport doesn't come easily, and David has a rigorous training regime to hone his fitness.
Most of my training is actually done on a road bike. At the beginning of the season, I concentrate quite a lot on the mountain bike just to get the technique and sort of race ready, my body race ready, really. But as the season progresses, I do more and more work on the road bikes. You're working on probably a 4 or 5 week cycle, and 1 week you might be doing as little as 8 or 10 hours, whereas another week you might be doing 25, 30 hours a week. So it does vary from week to week.
And so to the race which everyone had been anticipating with so much excitement, the World Championships in the setting of Bromont in Canada. The fans were there in force to cheer on their favourites, and the best riders in the world were gathered, hoping to claim the title of World Mountain Bike Champion. In the women's race and on home soil, Alison Siders set off very well, pushed on by healthy home support. Switzerland's Sylvia First was back in second place, working hard to stay in touch. While defending champion Ruthie Mathis was third. By lap 2 it was all change. First had decided to come off the back wheel of Sider and hit the front. Sider could only watch her pass by and try stay in touch. As the race progressed, First began to look really strong. And with her recent win in Kirchzarten, it looked like she'd saved her best efforts for the end of season climax. Alison Sider wouldn't let go though, and was determined to give the Canadians something to shout about. Back in third and wearing the colours of the USA, Ruthie Mathis sensed the championship was slipping from her grasp. At the line, Sylvia First took the race, the gold medal and the title of Champion of the World. Sylvia and her team, well, were pretty happy about her success. In the men's race, it was John Termack who hit the front first, defending his World Championship title. Denmark's Henrik Jernis was sitting on his wheel in second place. Britain's David Baker was strongly placed too, riding well in the rally and national colours. By lap 2, the field was beginning to splinter, with Austria's Gerhard Zadrobilek, fresh from his win in Kirchzarten, hitting the front. David Baker stayed second, Jernis third, Termack fourth. It was interesting that Zadrobilek, Janice and Baker had all peaked near the end of the season, and their concentration on this race, above all else, was beginning to pay dividends. Janice, second in Kirchzarten, continued to get away. But now the familiar figure of Thomas Frischneck had moved into second position and was trying to claw him back. Frischneck had had a fabulous season, and while Janice was working hard to pull away and hoping to surprise both the rest of the field with his break, Frischneck too had his eye on the prize. He hoped to add the title of world champion to his Grundig World Cup win. Britain's David Baker, meanwhile, was having a superb ride and delighted the crowds with his reluctance to let any obstacle hinder his excellent bike handling technique. Janice, though, was beginning to consolidate his lead, and by the final lap was exerting a steel grip on the gold medal position. Frischneck was still desperately trying to catch him, but must have been focusing on silver, whilst David Baker, back in third spot, was simply having the ride of his life. At the finish, it was Janice who the crowd first glimpsed an unprecedented but thoroughly deserved victory for the Dane. Frischneck came in second position and would have to settle for a lower step on the podium on this occasion. As would David Baker, a fantastic ride and a World Championship bronze medal to add to his list of domestic honours. Another wonderful season. Confirmation of the result then, Sylvia first took the world crown, Alison Sider came in second, and Ruthie Mathis of the USA was third. In the men's event, Grundig World Cup winner Thomas Frischneck had to be happy with a silver medal. Britain's David Baker took the bronze, while Denmark's Henrik Janice stole the show and became world champion. So a wonderful season of mountain biking comes to a close. Let's hope next season has as many great moments to savour.